So I'm heading back up to AFR for a Thursday night grappling session. Jiu-jitsu techniques, probably a bit of grappling at the end. And you know, this is something that years of being a martial artist has taught me. You're only ever going to be as good as you deserve to be. The reason I love martial arts so much is because it's honest. It doesn't care about your emotions, doesn't care about your feelings, doesn't give a fuck about your ego. It's just going to give you exactly what you deserve to get out of it. And it's not just the physical aspect of martial arts that this applies to. It's the mental and the spiritual side of things. MMA has ruined martial arts in a certain way. It's made it much more physical. It's made it much more exciting. It's made it much more real in that it's removed the wheat from the chaff from what is effective as a fighting art. If there's rules and it's a one-on-one basis, which is a sport, not really, I suppose, what martial arts was designed for. Martial arts originally was designed for the battlefield and keeping you safe in times of raping and pillaging and conquering. But the ethos of what martial arts is still should remain, because we haven't evolved as a species to not be able to benefit from what it can offer, what the essence of martial arts can offer you, both as an individual and as a society. You see, I have this concept in my head of a pyramid. And because of my background in coaching and training people, over the years, the experience I've gained has allowed me to see patterns. And the pattern's very simple. Everyone on this earth is carrying a lot of heavy trauma. What that trauma is, we can individualize and we can put levels on, but for the person experiencing it, it's the same. It's debilitating and it's affecting them in a way that's preventing them from stepping forward in their lives. And most people listen to the coaches of today and they see the Instagram models and they see all the training programs run about, and these people on Facebook and social media presenting these images of their before and after transformations, and we attach a story to that image, a story that, while may make us feel bad about ourselves, can offer hope. I too can look like that if I put the effort in. My life can take a turn for the better if I achieve that physique. And we attribute this belief that if you're in shape, you will suddenly have a better life, because that's what's presented on social media over and over again. And when you're presenting that to someone who's miserable about who they currently are, that's a very appealing prospect. So it's easy to sell, because if you're looking to sell hot dogs, the first thing you look for is a hungry crowd. And there's a hungry crowd out there of people who are desperate, so hungry to just have a better physique, because they're turning to food and they're turning to addictive habits that aren't conducive with a good body, and they're turning to them as a coping mechanism because they want to escape the reality of this world. Because the truth is, this world's hard. Even though technologically we're the most advanced we've ever been, and we don't have manual labour, and we've got a longer life expectancy, whether that expectancy means quality life or not is irrelevant. We're going to live longer, and that's because technology makes life easier. But with that level of easiness being changed each generation, there comes with it responsibility within each and every one of us to ensure that we keep the barometer of what our emotional and physical and mental capabilities are at a higher level. And that means actively seeking out difficult situations that for our grandparents and our great-grandparents, and to a lot of extent our parents, their generations would have just seen those difficulties as normal everyday life. So we have a weak society with people who are overweight, unhappy with who they are, don't like the reflection stars in their face, and they want the easy way out, 12-week transformation programs, because it offers really good results in a short period of time. And we convince ourselves we can do that because none of us really want to commit to a lifestyle change. And for me, spirituality should be the main focus for everyone. Whether you believe in in the Abrahamic religions, or it's like a New Age belief, or even if you're atheist, spirituality could simply mean standing on top of a mountain and surveying what you look upon and realising that for thousands of years men have stood in this same spot you're standing right at that moment, surveying a similar landscape, and many years after you're gone the same thing will be happening. Because the truth is, we're not that important. We're only important in our own mind. We're only important to a very select few number of people. But in the grand scheme of Earth, we're insignificant. We're merely the blink of an eye. And when you can understand that and you realise that the world doesn't revolve around you and there's things bigger than you, it allows you to remove yourself from that need of filling yourself full of egotistical stories to make yourself feel better, and instead start connecting with yourself and the moment. And martial arts offers that in abundance. And then you've got the mental game, and for me, mentality sits in the middle of the pyramid on top of spirituality. So the bigger your base of spirituality, the better the mental game you're going to have, the more understanding and willingness to accept what is and try to find ways and methods to overcome these challenges. And it's only when you have the spiritual game and the mental game can you truly hope to get the physical game. Now, of course, there's different people will have different experiences, and this rule is not going to sit with everyone. It's not going to be applied to everyone either, but it's a good rule of thumb, and I take it from the martial arts, because the martial arts is the spiritual, the mental and the physical. It's a trinity, the training trinity. And if one isn't in balance with the other, then two of the sides have to then support one that isn't in balance, and that causes a slight wavering left or right. And the only one you can truly rely on to fix this and bring it into balance is yourself. And to do that is going to require a journey. You're going to have to experience a lot of ups and downs. This is what martial arts offers, and it's what MMA doesn't. MMA is so focused on the monetary side of things, because it's now become a business, that there isn't any room for the spiritual side of things. And like I said in my example, the spiritual has to be the biggest foundation, because you're going to encounter challenges in your life, and the physical muscle you have and the skill set you have aren't going to cut the mustard, because they're not going to be of a physical nature. They're going to be a mental and a spiritual game. And this is where I think MMA is lacking. And it's lacking because simply money isn't to be made in the game of MMA when it comes to spiritual. And it's what you can do physically at that moment. And that's why trainers will pay thousands and coaches will pay thousands every year to go to a mindset coach. And that's why they'll pay strength and conditioning coaches thousands and thousands every year, because those two aspects are recognised. Once you become a fighter and you realise that actually it's your attitude towards the training outside of the 15 minutes in the cage is where the results are truly found, then people are more willing to invest in the mindset game. But the spiritual side of things, it's the key in my opinion. And it's not that MMA fighters don't have the ability to discover this. They do. We all do. Doesn't matter what you do in life, fighter or not, whether you're homeless, high tech executive, whatever, it doesn't matter. We spend a lot of our time wasted on the internet, scrolling through mindless stories and shit that doesn't matter, because we want to be distracted. We actually don't want to sit with ourselves. We find excuses not to just be alone with our own thoughts and our own emotions. And MMA doesn't encourage this type of training, because it doesn't have financial gains to be made for the clubs, for the fighters, for the coaches. But for the individual, this is where the magic lies, because not only do you become happier with yourself, and not only do you discover parts of you didn't know existed, you begin to encounter what truly is challenge. And what truly is challenge differs from each individual. For me, jumping off a cliff is something that I just could not face doing. It is a true fear for me. But for some of my friends, it's the biggest buzz they could ever think of. My biggest, deepest, darkest fear was expressing emotion, expressing love. 4 years ago I couldn't have done that. But the spiritual journey I've been on has helped me recognise that these fears that I held on to were actually the reason I was unhappy with who I was. That everything I was seeking was to be found on the other side of expressing who I truly am and how I was truly feeling. And for me, that's what the martial art warrior is. Someone who is willing to go into their darkest fears, the pits of everything that creates terror in their heart, and encounter them, sit with them, face them and overcome them. Learn from the experience and apply them to become a better man. But today's society is set up to make it too easy for us to not have to do that. We can find praise in others in much easier ways by editing a video like I'm going to do now and present the message that we want people to hear in a way that makes us look good and feel better about ourselves, and the praise we receive from others goes to soothe our soul for a few moments. But like a heroin addict, it becomes an addiction. It becomes a need, a craving. If I feel bad, I must do another video, I must get likes from other people. And that becomes this cycle, and it never really helps you. Again, there's nothing wrong with embracing modern technology and society today. The internet, I keep on saying, is a tool. It should be used as a tool, but tools can be used for good and bad. A surgeon can save someone's life with a scalpel. A robber can take someone's with it, but the knife, the blade still remains just a tool. And how we wield our tools, having that discipline to recognise when we're stepping outside of the areas we know we should remain in to stay balanced. Recognising when we're actually trying to portray a message that's helpful rather than one that's validating. This is what we should be seeking to do. Unfortunately, that's difficult. That requires not doing something that your very being is crying out for you to do. The trauma within us all begins poking its ugly head out again, and instead of facing it, we avoid it by turning to social media, by turning to food, by turning to drugs, by turning to drink, by turning to cigarettes, by turning to gossip, by turning to whatever our habit is to distract ourselves from what it is our souls are craving us to heal. Martial arts is not a sport. Martial arts is a way of being. It's a system to living. Here's one thing I know. If every man, woman and child was made to do a martial art, violence would be a lot lower. Communities would be a lot more stable. Now, I don't mean doing a leisure centre martial art 3 times a week with an instructor who can barely tie his belt around his belly. I'm talking about embracing the culture of the martial art ethos. I'm talking about living the way of martial arts. His name escapes me right now. You'll know who I'm talking about. Any martial artist that'll come to me after I finish this. The Book of 5 Rings, Mashido Mashadamada, God, his name's gone. But there was a man who, for his life, violence was an integral part of it. 60 one-on-one battles to the death. So he killed 60 men in one-on-one combat. That's a guy that can't afford to fuck around. He couldn't just turn up and just go through the rigmarole of a few strokes while thinking about the latest level he's on in Call of Duty. When he was doing martial arts, he applied every second, every breath, every movement to honing perfection. And that attitude crossed over to everything in his life. He embraced poetry with the same rigour and resolve as he did with his swordsmanship. When he was in the garden, he was applying as much love, care and focus and attention to each leaf he pruned and where the placements of every flower went as he would to the stroke of a sword in the middle of a battle. For him, life was about seeking perfection and balance. There's something very romantic about it, I get it, but there's something very beautiful about that. Because his focus was on self-mastery, self-control. In the back of his mind, he understood that anything less than perfect could, if the winds of chance decided, result in him dead. And people like him become legends because they are very few and far between. But regardless of what you want to say, the fact he exists means that there's a possibility that each and every one of us can experience something similar. Because he wasn't a god or a demigod, he was just a man who had decided to apply himself to seek out being as perfect in everything he applied his life to. Living in the absolute moment. Not worrying about the past. Not thinking on the future. But just living every moment for its own individual experience. And that requires discipline. It requires you cultivating an acceptance of sacrifice, but the sacrifice will lead to long-term betterment. It's the surrendering to the realization that mastery and improvement doesn't come overnight. It can't be sought in 2 or 12 weeks. It can't be mastered in a year. It leads down a path of being able to recognize your own feelings and what are the areas in your life that are holding you back, and discovering new stories and situations about yourself that will allow you to become better. This for me is what martial arts is. Martial arts, it's a way of improving who you are, and if it's not doing that on all three fronts, physically, mentally and spiritually or emotionally, if it's not doing that, if there's something lacking there, then you need to take action to change that. What good is becoming physically and mentally stronger if you haven't got the strength of spirit to not use it against weaker people in society? How does it benefit you as a man to become skilled in the art of violence if you don't have the mindset and the emotional maturity to be able to control yourself from exploding when other people trigger you? MMA is a great avenue for boys to become men, but there needs to be a genuine focus on the spiritual and mental growth that goes along with the physical growth of skill and strength, confidence and ability. Martial arts completely change young men's lives, but I've also seen them be destroyed with it because they didn't have the upbringing or the mentoring available to control the trauma that lurked within them all. I knew young men who could have made it to UFC, but instead are struggling with their mental health because they didn't have the guidance, they didn't have that mentor to put their arm around them and tell them what they needed to hear, maybe not what they wanted, but what they needed to hear. Didn't have someone there to guide them through the hard time. For a lot of young men, the fighting's the easy part. They've been beaten down so much throughout their lives that 15 minutes of beating down on someone else is an escape. And if they're the ones getting beat, it doesn't matter because they're not going to take a beating like they've taken before in their lives. They can handle it. For them guys, that's not their true battle. That's their escape. And the problem is we lack a lot of coaches who have their own emotional maturity to recognise this. They don't see these kids for what they are and actually exacerbate the problem through bigging these kids up and making them believe that they're just these ultimate fighters, and they're not. They're really kids still. Kids who are now being unleashed in the streets with serious skills. And that is why I believe May needs an injection of the martial arts spirit back into it, because MMA has the potential to completely change young men's lives. It does teach you the truth of the situation, that no matter how big you think you are, no matter how strong you think you are, no matter how tough you think you are, no matter what all your friends tell you, there's still someone bigger and stronger than you who's going to be willing to be nasty than you and make a dick out of you the way you made a dick out of someone else. And when you have that threat hanging over you, when you have that realization, that understanding, and you've experienced it for yourself, it can maybe help change your mindset. And if everyone was to be like that and just use the martial arts for the sporting side of things, for the competitive side of things, and not for the egotistical and proving yourself scenarios, this world could be so much better. As parents, we should be ensuring our children all do martial arts. It should be part of their schooling system. In Saudi Arabia, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is part of the schooling system. So now you're going to have entire generations of children growing up with the vast majority of them having a love for a grappling art, meaning that they're all equalizers and egos can be challenged very quickly and put in check by smaller opponents, and people know that, so they're going to be less likely to attack, less likely to fight, less likely to start problems. I extrapolate that across the world and you can see the potential.